more of what you mean by that. So I'm thinking, for example, with environmental problems like climate change, other environmental problems. Most economists accept that these are market externalities. So in other words, there are certain environmental values that are not taken into account by the price mechanism. Therefore, most supporters of capitalism are in favour of regulation in order to make sure that those values are taken into account by the market. So I'm wondering, if you're in favour of less regulation, do you feel in a way that you're going against the grain in some ways, even amongst supporters of capitalism? Because, as well, we hear a lot at the moment talk about the banking crisis and a lot of talk about more regulation. So what exactly does it mean to be in favour of less regulation? Are you thinking of, is this a laissez-faire view that you've got of the market economy?
Well, I think I'll know when I've got there. I think you have to start. I run a think tank, and we start from the real world and say, how can we actually improve things? And I'm not going to say that everything should be privatised overnight. That would be a revolutionary idea, which you
careful,
rightly investigate. But what I would say is right. Yes, pay unto Caesar what's due to Caesar. There are some things which the market does, and there are some things which it cannot do. Money doesn't buy you love or truth or honesty. It might actually buy you groceries, or it might even buy you a taxi service or something like that. That's what the market is there for. There are clearly externalities, things like environmental pollution and such like. My view is that most of those things, or many of those things at least, are the problem of not having a sufficiently deep market, not having the market go deeply enough. I mean, it's, I think of the tragedy of the commons, and that again, I've just come back from Moscow, and if you go to Moscow apartments, the entrance hall is all falling, and the apartments are fantastic, and it's because they're commonly owned and nobody looks after them. And I think that's a misfortune, and therefore what I want to do is to extend the market as far as possible into all of those areas, so that people do actually husband those resources and look after them and improve them. And find if they can't, well, yes, of course, you're going to have some kind of government regulation. I mean, I always say that in the market, you need a fire basket to contain the fire. That you do need a system of rules under which people operate, and they have to be rules of honesty and of property and of contract, so that people know what they're getting. So you do need that system of rules, and yes, a market economy exists within a legal structure, and I'm sure that your sort of society would exist in a legal structure as well, and you'd have to have politicians of some sort deciding what that legal structure is and making sure that people obeyed it. So that's really the role of regulation, but I think so many of our problems are due to too much regulation rather than too little.
If you take a problem like climate change, for example, I mean, in the scale of the regulation you might need, arguably, so considerable that you actually need some kind of planning. We talked about planning before. Maybe capitalism is going to need to go more into the direction of planning to address that kind of.
Well, I think on that count, I don't really want to go into this because I'm not an expert on the science. But if climate change is, and indeed warming is a real problem, the question is what is the best way to deal with it? And the best way to deal with it, speaking as an economist, is not simply trying to produce less so that you're producing fewer pollutants. It's actually to use your technology to overcome that problem. And one of the ways that you can do that is to grow your economy so that you're actually richer and you've got more resources to spend on these kinds of problems. We spend money on things which 100 years ago people took them for granted. Now we don't tolerate them because we're rich and we can afford not to tolerate them, or we can afford not to have coal and smoke all over our cities and all the rest of it, because we found better ways of doing it, and we're rich enough to do that. So I want to see us exploiting new forms of technology rather than, sorry, somebody's exasperated. New forms of technology to overcome these problems. Science cracks these problems, and you need to be wealthy enough to do that. And I'm sure people talk about 2 degrees warming in 100 years' time. Well, in 100 years' time, my grandchildren or great-grandchildren are going to be far richer than I am. In 30 years, the productivity of the world has already doubled. So that means that you can solve these problems. And I think that the sort of Kyoto-style regulation is exactly not the way to do it. It will impoverish the planet, and it will be worst of all for the poorest people.
Right. Yeah. On the Socialist Party of Great Britain, could I just ask Dr. Butler how the First and Second World Wars, a product of capitalism, what benefit they were to the working class of the world? I'd just like to know.
I'm not a historian, and I dispute the idea that war is a capitalist creation.
It's really, I am a historian and it's very bad for business.
Yes. I've always believed that when countries trade together, they're much less likely to go to war. And the reason for that is because people have a stake in that trade and that exchange. And therefore, I want to see a world in which all countries, all nations, all people are involved in a global exchange system, because then they've got a stake in maintaining good relations with everybody else. You don't go to war with somebody that's supplying your essential need. So that, I think, would be my answer.
Right, thank you. As a member of the Socialist Party, and I'm so pleased that I am, it makes me getting out of bed in the morning worthwhile. I never feel unhappy to get out of bed. I'd just like to say, in view of your countries trade together, well, I'm not going to go too far back, not as far back as some of the speakers here, but not so long ago, Britain was riding high on the backs of a great many other people in countries far away from here. That's where they made their wealth. They still haven't come to that conclusion. They got their wealth. Not everyone can go around the world pouncing off of other people. Deprivation, degradation, and despair which they bring to them. Britain didn't have great ideas, invent something, and make money that way. They took from other people. They took people's lives, their children, generation after generation. And historians should know that, so that will get that one through. The other thing is, firstly, I am really angry when I hear nonsense from people who wear t-shirts or hats or make a point about they're a communist, they're a socialist, and Marx used the terms interchangeably. He used them as though they're really the same. You, Eamonn, and I think you gave a really good speech. I really enjoyed your talk and everything else. The vote motive is corrupt. I don't know if you remember coming out with that. Now, my understanding since being with the Socialist Party, and I believe every Socialist member of the party, would say that Socialists are not looking to go and be career politicians, sitting in Parliament, nicking the expenses and lining our pockets. We're not interested in that. We want to abolish Parliament. We want to get rid of leaders. We're not friends with Stalin. We've never been friends with Lenin. We know nothing about Marx at all. Cuba was never socialist. Africa, don't bring the tyrants to me that they were socialists. They might have called themselves Marxist this or Marxist that, but there are 12 million different types of Marxism. Socialism, as defined by us, is the control of the working class. Whether you call yourself middle class, upper middle class, lower middle class, to the side middle class, or whatever, we the ones who go to work for a wage or a salary, where we have to prostitute ourselves for longer time than necessary, in a financial crisis like the speaker here said from the Socialist Party, people working for nothing in capitalism. There's got to be a law against that. Capitalism is supposed to pay you. It's such a disgrace. Every day capitalism destroys millions of lives around the world. We have crap, shoddy, stinking food which we're supposed to be pleased about because it's cheap. I want to eat decent food. I want my children to eat decent food, particularly when I'm pregnant. I want those things, and I don't think I'm the only person in the world. I'm not shouting at you. I'm just a bit angry